let's get started with today's rundown and big news out of Syria.
Yeah, huge developments there. We're seeing the fall of the Assad regime after decades in power.
It really is a major shift in the region.
Yeah.
And kind of surprising how quickly it all happened.
Definitely. The rebel forces, led by the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS for short, took control faster than many anticipated.
And now, Bashar al-Assad, he's fled to Russia.
That's right, leaving Syria in a very uncertain position. And with HTS now in charge, things could get even more complicated.
Especially given that HTS is classified as a terrorist organization by the UN.
Yeah, that's going to make things tricky. It's highly unlikely that the international community will recognize this new government with that label attached to it.
And internally, things are already pretty volatile.
Definitely seeing a lot of tension between Assad loyalists and the new Interior Ministry troops.
Just this week, 14 of the new troops were killed in clashes near Tartus.
Yeah, it was a stronghold for Assad, so this really highlights just how fragile the situation is right now.
And adding to the tension is this video circulating online, appearing to show an attack on an Alawite shrine.
Oh, wow.
The Alawite community, which held a lot of power under Assad, is understandably angry and scared.
I can imagine.
The city of Homs is currently under curfew because of unrest sparked by that video.
It's a powder keg. And we haven't even mentioned the protests breaking out over the burning of a Christmas tree.
Yeah, that raises concerns about the safety of minorities under this new regime.
It's definitely something to watch closely. And to complicate things even further, a lot of former Assad officers are refusing to disarm.
Definitely a recipe for continued instability. So it really begs the question, what does this all mean for Syria's future and for the broader region?
It's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately one with no easy answers. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on it. But for now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Finland. They're currently investigating whether a Russian ship was involved in damaging an undersea electricity cable that connects Finland to Estonia.
I saw that. It's called S-Link 2, right?
Yeah, that's the one. And it's pretty vital for the power grid in the region.
So what's the suspected culprit?
Finnish authorities think it might have been the anchor of a tanker called the Eagle S.
The Eagle S. What's the connection to Russia?
Well, it's flying the Cook Islands flag, but they believe it's actually part of Russia's Shadow Fleet.
Shadow Fleet.
Essentially a network of ships that are used to transport Russian oil products that are currently under embargo.
Ah, okay.
The EU is already considering imposing more sanctions against Russia, and this whole incident really highlights the security threats posed by this Shadow Fleet, especially in the Baltic Sea.
I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen something like this, right?
You're absolutely right. It seems like there have been a number of similar incidents lately.
Like what? Remind me.
Well, just back in November, there was that telecommunications cable that was cut between Finland and Germany.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And around the same time, there was also a disruption to the internet link to Gotland Island. Seems like that one might have been linked to the same kind of activity.
So a pattern is starting to emerge here.
Definitely raises concerns about the vulnerability of these crucial undersea cables. Whether it's intentional sabotage or just accidents, the potential for disruption is there, and that's a big problem.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we also have some tragic news coming out of Norway where a bus crash has claimed the lives of at least 3 people.
That's right. A bus veered off the road in the Hadsel district, ended up partially submerged in a lake.
Terrible. Were there any survivors?
There were, but several sustained serious injuries. And with the heavy snow and strong winds they were experiencing at the time, the rescue efforts were pretty challenging.
It makes it all the more tragic to hear that many of the passengers were foreign nationals.
It does. The Norwegian authorities are still looking into what caused the crash, but it serves as a sobering reminder about the dangers of winter travel, especially in those sorts of conditions.
Definitely. And sadly, more tragic news, this time from the world of sports. 2 sailors have died during the Sydney to Hobart yacht race.
A terrible accident. Both crew members were fatally struck by the boom that's the large pole attached to the sail in 2 separate incidents.
Wow, that's awful. What will happen to the race?
It's going to continue, but these deaths definitely cast a shadow over the event.
Absolutely. Our thoughts are with the families and friends of those lost at sea. Now, shifting focus to Yemen, where we're seeing an escalation of tensions with Israeli airstrikes hitting Sana's international airport.
They also hit a power station, along with several ports and other infrastructure. Houthi-run media is reporting at least 6 casualties.
And Israel, what's their justification?
They're calling them intelligence-based strikes, claiming they targeted military sites belonging to the Houthi rebels.
Right, because Israel considers the Houthis to be a terrorist organization.
Exactly. But this situation is particularly worrisome because the UN health chief, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, he was actually at the airport when the strikes hit.
What was he doing there?
He was in Yemen to negotiate the release of some detained UN staff and to assess the humanitarian situation in the country.
This conflict has been going on for so long, and it just seems to be getting worse.
It really is a dire situation, and this incident with the UN health chief really raises questions about the safety of civilians and humanitarian workers in these conflict zones.
Absolutely. And it also highlights just how volatile the situation in Yemen is and how it could potentially draw in more regional and international actors.
That's very true. Speaking of volatile situations and international actors, former U.S. President Donald Trump, well, he's back in the headlines with some controversial remarks about Greenland and the Panama Canal.
Oh boy, what's he saying now?
He's claiming that U.S. ownership of both Greenland and the Panama Canal is an absolute necessity for national security and global freedom.
These are ideas he kind of floated during his first term, right?
Yeah, he did. But they didn't exactly get a warm reception back then, and they're raising even more eyebrows now.
So what's the reaction been like this time around?
Well, Greenland's prime minister has already come out and said very bluntly that Greenland is not for sale.
Makes sense. It is an autonomous Danish territory, after all.
Right. And Panama has also pushed back against Trump's claims.
It seems like he's really trying to revive his America First strategy, but it's just not sitting well on the global stage.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how this plays out when he takes office again in January.
Very interesting. All right, let's end this segment on a lighter note. After almost 250 years, the bald eagle has finally been officially declared the national bird of the United States.
Finally. It only took them a couple of centuries.
It's kind of funny because the bald eagle has been a symbol of the U.S. since 1782. It even appears on the Great Seal.
But it never actually received this formal recognition until now?
Well, better late than never, I guess.
I suppose so. It's been quite a day in the world of current events, wouldn't you say?
You said it. From political turmoil and international incidents to, well, symbolic avian news.
Yeah, there's never a dull moment. But we've got more to cover, so let's dive into some other news stories.
Let's do it. Things are heating up in South Korea's political scene right now, with opposition lawmakers filing a motion to impeach Prime Minister Han Duck-soo.
And he's currently acting as the country's leader, correct?
That's right. And this whole thing stems from his refusal to appoint constitutional court judges who were nominated by the opposition Democratic Party.
They're also accusing him of supporting President Yoon Suk-yeol's recent attempt to impose martial law.
It's getting pretty messy over there.
To say the least. And the situation is made even more complex by the fact that President Yoon himself is also facing an impeachment vote.
Talk about a political roller coaster.
If this motion against Han succeeds, it could really destabilize South Korea's political landscape, which is already quite fragile.
Absolutely. From political turmoil to a prison break, we've got reports that over 1,500 inmates have escaped from a prison in Mozambique.
Wow, how did that happen?
Well, it seems they took advantage of the chaos caused by the ongoing protests sparked by those disputed election results.
Ah, right. Those protests began after the country's highest court upheld the ruling Frelimo party's victory in the October presidential elections.
The opposition is claiming that the vote was rigged.
And understandably so.
The whole situation has spiraled into violence and looting.
So the prisoners basically saw an opportunity and seized it.
Yeah, it just adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation in Mozambique.
Definitely not what they needed right now. Shifting gears to a concerning health story, bird flu has tragically claimed the lives of 20 big cats at an animal sanctuary in Washington state.
That's awful.
It really highlights the threat of avian influenza, not just to birds, but to mammals as well.
I mean, we've seen cases in cattle and even a human infection recently, haven't we?
Exactly, and the fact that the virus is spreading across different species is a real concern. It raises the possibility of it mutating and becoming a bigger threat to human health.
No one wants to see another pandemic.
Definitely not. That sanctuary in Washington is now under quarantine to try and prevent further spread.
Hopefully that will help contain it. And in another heartbreaking story, a 2-week-old baby girl has frozen to death in a tent in Gaza.
Oh, that's just devastating.
And this isn't an isolated incident. This is actually the third child in a week to die from hypothermia in similar conditions.
It's a tragic reminder of the humanitarian crisis happening in Gaza. Millions of Palestinians are living in makeshift shelters, struggling to survive.
The conditions are just dire.
The international community is calling for increased aid and a ceasefire, but it's unclear if those calls will be heeded.
Sadly, we also have to report the deaths of 5 Palestinian journalists who were killed in an Israeli airstrike.
That's terrible. Where did this strike occur?
They were in a van belonging to the Quds Today TV channel parked outside a hospital in Gaza.
In Israel, what's their justification?
They're claiming they were targeting Islamic Jihad operatives who were posing as journalists.
But that explanation isn't sitting well with many. Press freedom organizations around the world are condemning the incident.
And rightfully so. The safety of journalists, especially in conflict zones, is absolutely paramount.
This incident just underscores the dangers they face while trying to report from the front lines. Now, in Taiwan, there's some political fallout happening after former presidential candidate Ko Wen-je was charged with corruption.
He was considered a rising star in Taiwanese politics at one point, wasn't he?
He was promoting himself as an alternative to the two main parties.
What are the charges against him?
He's accused of accepting bribes during his time as Taipei's mayor and also of misreporting campaign finances during his presidential run.
So, not looking good for him.
The prosecutors are seeking a pretty lengthy prison sentence. This is a significant blow to his Taiwan People's Party, which had been gaining some momentum as a potential third force in Taiwanese politics.
It'll be interesting to see how this impacts the party's future and the broader political landscape in Taiwan.
Absolutely. Let's move on to a story about a Nigerian watchmaker who's worried that his craft is fading away.
I saw that. It's a bit of a bittersweet story.
It is. His name is Bala Muhammad, but he's known as Baba Bala. He's been repairing watches for over 50 years, a skill he learned from his father.
But in the age of smartphones, fewer people need their watches fixed.
Exactly. His business has really dwindled.
It's a trend we're seeing across many skilled trades.
Technology is changing the world, and sometimes those changes come at a cost.
But Baba Bala's story isn't just about loss. It's also about the importance of adapting and finding ways to preserve those traditional skills.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about a fascinating art exhibition showcasing how Indian artists have envisioned the birth of Christ.
I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds intriguing. What can you tell me about it?
Well, it's a collection of paintings depicting the nativity scene, but through a distinctly Indian lens.
So not your typical Western-style depictions.
Not at all. You'll see everything from Mughal-era works that incorporate Islamic motifs to more modern interpretations that blend Christian themes with local folklore.
It sounds like a really unique exploration of the intersection of faith, culture, and art.
It really is, and it challenges the idea that there's only one way to depict such a significant event.
I'll have to check it out. Speaking of artistic expression, there's a story about how a famous Christmas carol is inspiring Ukrainian defenders.
You're talking about Shadrach, right? Better known in the West as Carol of the Bells.
That's the one. And it has deep roots in Ukraine, originating in the city of Pokrovsk, which is sadly now quite close to the front lines of the war.
And what's so inspiring is that a Ukrainian military band has adopted the song as a symbol of resistance.
They're even performing it in the trenches, using improvised instruments.
The power of music, even amidst such hardship.
It really speaks to the resilience of the human spirit, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, beauty and hope can still shine through. But we have some breaking news coming out of the Vatican.
What's happening?
Pope Francis has officially launched a special Jubilee year for Roman Catholics.
He opened the Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica to mark the occasion.
Quite a spectacle.
This is a pretty rare event, isn't it?
Yeah, it only happens every 25 years. They're expecting millions of pilgrims to travel to Rome during this Jubilee year to seek forgiveness for their sins and to participate in the various religious ceremonies.
It's a significant moment for the Catholic Church. Okay, let's lighten the mood a bit with a story about a house fire in Massachusetts.
This one has a rather unusual twist to it.
Yeah, apparently fireworks started exploding in the middle of the blaze.
Fortunately, no one was injured.
That's good. But can you imagine the scene? A house fire with fireworks going off?
Must have been pretty surreal.
Definitely not your everyday house fire. And for our last story, let's travel to France, to the heart of wine country, where a surprising trend is emerging.
Oh, you mean the rise of alcohol-free wine in Bordeaux?
That's the one. It's a region that's world-renowned for its traditional winemaking, and now vintners are embracing the production of non-alcoholic wines.
It's quite a shift for a country where wine is practically a national treasure.
Definitely. So what's driving this change?
Well, there are several factors at play. Wine consumption in France has been declining. There's a growing health-conscious younger generation, and the technology for dealcoholization has gotten significantly better.
So it seems like even the most traditional industries are having to adapt to changing consumer preferences.
Absolutely. And these French winemakers, they're hoping that this innovation will help them reach new markets and revitalize their industry.
It's a fascinating development. All right, that wraps up this part of our news rundown.
All right, picking up where we left off, let's talk about music. Specifically, how A Christmas Carol is becoming a symbol of hope and resilience in war-torn Ukraine.
We're talking about Shedrick, right? The one that's known as Carol of the Bells internationally.
That's the one. And what makes it even more poignant is that it was composed by Mykola Leontovich, who is actually from the city of Pokrovsk. And as we mentioned earlier, that city's now very close to the front lines.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about that connection. This Carol, born in a place that's facing so much hardship, now serving as a source of strength for Ukrainians.
It really is. And what's particularly moving is that a Ukrainian military band has even adopted Shedrick as part of their repertoire.
I heard about that. They're even performing it in the trenches, using instruments they've improvised from whatever they can find.
It's a testament to the power of music to unite and uplift, even amidst chaos and devastation.
Absolutely. And it also speaks to the Ukrainian people's determination to hold on to their cultural identity, even as their country is under attack. But unfortunately, we have to shift gears now to a much darker topic. The horrific attack in Magdeburg, Germany, where a car plowed through a Christmas market.
It's a tragedy that's understandably shaken Germany to its core. 5 people were killed and hundreds more were injured.
It's just heartbreaking. And it's sparking a lot of discussion about security, especially at public events, and about immigration policies as well.
Right. And what's especially concerning is how the far-right Alternative for Germany Party, the AfD, is trying to exploit this tragedy for political gain.
Even though the suspect actually expressed support for the AfD himself.
It's a classic example of how extremist groups try to capitalize on fear and division to advance their own agendas.
It's crucial to resist those attempts and focus on promoting unity and understanding, especially in the wake of such a horrific event. On a more positive note, there's a really inspiring story coming out of Haiti. Kenyan forces are working to help combat the escalating gang violence that's gripping the nation.
The situation in Haiti is absolutely dire. It's been spiraling out of control since the assassination of President Jovenel Moise back in 2021. That created a power vacuum that allowed gangs to flourish.
And they're now controlling huge swaths of Port-au-Prince.
It's a full-blown humanitarian crisis. There's widespread violence, kidnappings are rampant, and there's a looming famine.
It's just heartbreaking. So what are these Kenyan forces doing to help?
Well, they're part of a multinational security force that's tasked with restoring some semblance of order.
But that's got to be a daunting task. These gangs are heavily armed, and they outnumber the security forces.
It's an incredibly dangerous mission. But the Kenyan forces seem committed to helping the Haitian people.
It's commendable, for sure. Their efforts are so crucial in trying to bring some stability to a nation that's teetering on the brink of collapse. All right, let's turn our attention back to the U.S. for a moment. There's been a lot of buzz about the House Ethics Committee report on former Congressman Matt Gaetz.
A lot of people have been waiting for this report. And let me tell you, it doesn't disappoint in terms of shocking allegations.
Yeah, it really paints a disturbing picture of Gaetz's conduct while he was in office.
The report details allegations of Gaetz paying women for sex, using drugs, and obstructing justice. It's pretty damning stuff.
Of course, it's important to remember that these are just allegations at this point, and Gaetz has vehemently denied any wrongdoing.
That's true. But the level of detail in the report is pretty compelling. They've got specific instances of payments, drug transactions, and even efforts by Gaetz to mislead investigators.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Will he face legal consequences? Will this tarnish his reputation?
Only time will tell. But this report has definitely thrown a wrench into his political future. Okay, let's move on to a more uplifting story. One that highlights the power of nature and the success of conservation efforts.
The bald eagle, right. That's a species that was once on the brink of extinction, and now it's flourishing in many parts of the U.S.
It's a truly remarkable comeback story. And it's fitting that the bald eagle has now officially been declared the national bird of the U.S.
It's a symbol of strength, freedom, and resilience, all qualities that we associate with America.
Definitely. And it's a reminder that even in the face of environmental challenges, positive change is possible. Now, let's hop over to India for a moment. Art historians there are shedding light on how Indian artists have depicted the birth of Christ throughout history.
I find this so fascinating because it challenges the Western perspective that we're so used to seeing in religious art.
Exactly. This exhibition showcases a wide range of artistic styles and interpretations, reflecting India's incredibly diverse cultural tapestry.
So what kind of art are we talking about?
You'll see everything from Mughal-era paintings that incorporate Islamic motifs to more modern works inspired by local folklore and tribal art.
Wow, that sounds incredible. It's amazing how art can transcend borders and offer such fresh perspectives.
It reminds us that faith and spirituality can be expressed in countless ways, and that beauty and meaning can be found in unexpected places. Now, let's circle back to a topic we touched on earlier: the growing popularity of alcohol-free wine in France.
It's a trend that's really challenging traditional notions of winemaking, especially in a country like France, where wine is so deeply ingrained in the culture.
It's definitely turning heads. So, what's driving this shift?
Well, there are several factors at play. There's a growing awareness of the health implications of alcohol, especially among younger generations. And there's also been a general decline in overall wine consumption in France.
And let's not forget about the advancements in de-alcoholization technology. Those have made a big difference in the quality of non-alcoholic wines.
Right, they're not the bland grape juice-like beverages they used to be. French winemakers are really embracing this innovation, hoping it'll help them tap into new markets.
It's definitely an interesting development to watch. It's a sign that even the most traditional industries are having to adapt to changing consumer preferences.
All right, welcome back for the last leg of our news journey.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but we still have a few more stories to unpack.
Yeah, let's dive right in. First up, we want to talk about the challenges facing Palestinian Christians, particularly as we approach Christmas.
The ongoing conflict in Gaza and the West Bank has cast a long shadow, especially over Bethlehem.
The traditional birthplace of Jesus.
Exactly. And for the second year in a row, they've had to cancel public Christmas celebrations.
It's hard to imagine celebrating amidst such conflict.
It's been a double blow, too, because the lack of tourism has hit Bethlehem's economy really hard.
It's just a heartbreaking situation all around. It's understandable that many Palestinian Christians are feeling a sense of despair, even abandonment.
They're questioning why the international community seems to be turning a blind eye to their plight.
But amidst the darkness, there are glimmers of hope.
Local community groups are stepping up to fill the void. They're doing what they can to offer support to those in need.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the most challenging times, human kindness can make a difference.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about something a little lighter. Have you heard about this art exhibition in India that's causing a stir?
The one showcasing Indian artists' interpretations of the birth of Christ.
That's the one. It's generating a lot of buzz because it's a very different take on a story that's so often depicted from a Western perspective.
I'm really intrigued by this idea of seeing the nativity through an Indian lens.
The artists have incorporated their own cultural and artistic traditions, creating a truly unique collection.
So we're not just talking about traditional nativity scenes here.
Not at all. You'll see everything from Mughal-era paintings with Islamic influences to more contemporary pieces inspired by Indian folklore and tribal art.
It's really pushing the boundaries of how we visualize these stories.
It's a powerful reminder that art can transcend cultural divides and offer fresh perspectives on familiar narratives.
Speaking of transcending boundaries, let's talk about those Ukrainian wartime postage stamps that have become a global sensation.
There's so much more than just stamps.
I know, right? They've become these powerful symbols of Ukrainian resistance and national pride.
The designs are really striking, like that one with the soldier giving the middle finger to a Russian warship.
That one's become iconic.
And then there's that one with the tractor towing a captured Russian tank.
It's amazing how they've captured the spirit of defiance.
And they've also become a clever way to raise funds for humanitarian aid and support for the Ukrainian military.
It's a brilliant example of how something as small as a postage stamp can have a big impact.
It speaks to the power of creativity and symbolism, especially in times of crisis.
Well, we can't wrap up this episode without addressing the elephant in the room. Donald Trump's recent comments about Greenland and the Panama Canal.
Yeah, those raised a few eyebrows, to say the least.
He's suggesting that the U.S. should acquire both, claiming it's essential for national security and global freedom.
It's a bold statement, and not one that's been well received internationally.
Greenland has already made it clear they're not interested in being bought. And Panama isn't exactly thrilled with the idea either.
It seems like Trump is trying to resurrect his America First approach to foreign policy, But it's likely to cause more friction than anything else.
It'll be interesting to see what, if anything, comes of this when he takes office again.
It's never a dull moment in politics, that's for sure.
So we've gone from international conflicts and political intrigue to inspiring acts of resilience and artistic expression, and a little bit of everything in between.
It's a reminder that the world is a complex and ever-changing place.
But even amidst the chaos, there's always beauty and hope to be found. And that's something worth holding on to.
Couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure exploring these stories with you.
Likewise. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us for another news roundup.
We'll be back again soon to break down more of the stories shaping our world.
Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.